Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a train of storms that'll be bringing significant hail, damaging winds, and a few tornadoes to a large chunk of the United States over the next several days. We'll also be talking about the big pattern change as we head into later this June, which could bring some very significant heat to parts of the country. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll begin with the southern plains, which you might notice there is a huge complex of showers and storms that is rolling through areas like Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas. This is all weakening out. It's from an outflow boundary, a lot of convection, a lot of damaging wind potential and hail out of this, and this is going to be a prerequisite of what we're actually going to see later this afternoon and evening in terms of severe weather, because we'll be watching for a train of supercell storms to develop in Texas, and this could impact other areas outside of that as well. And then tomorrow that threat does shift a bit further to the east, but overall very active next few days is ahead, and this is just the beginning of what we're going to see in Texas and as well as anywhere in the southern plains. You'll notice back over in the Midwest we do have a low pressure system spinning. This is bringing showers, not really any storm activity across areas in the Midwest. The mid-Atlantic actually does have a chance for some isolated severe weather later today. I'll talk about more on that here in just a moment. That the threat does extend down into areas like Florida as well. And lastly, if you've not already realized, the omega block pattern is done in the United States. Our high pressure system that's in the upper levels is back up into the northern plains. This is really just keeping areas in the northern plains dry. Elsewhere, we have a very active weather pattern, and that is going to continue for the next several days. This is the jet stream. We're going to be talking about a lot of this in the next several forecasts because that has a lot to do with our weather this summer. You'll notice our trough back over the Midwest. That is spinning up some showers and storms across a large chunk of the country, primarily in the Midwest, Northeast, and Mid-Atlantic region. Our other low pressure system is back down in the Southwest United States. Pretty strong trough injection that is increasing the risk of severe weather in areas like the southern plains and as well as back through the Southeast United States. And then our ridge is back up into the northern plains and as well as into Canada in the upper levels. Now, over the next several days, interesting things are going to be happening. You'll notice as well we go into Wednesday into Thursday, that trough in the Midwest will slowly move off into the Northeast. The other trough that's impacting the southern plains will weaken out very quickly, but you'll notice it is still there. It's a very weak trough, so we might still see some shower and storm activity, maybe some isolated severe weather down the Southeast. Nothing too concerning though. Notice though by Thursday, there's actually going to be a negatively tilted trough up in Canada. This could be our next chance for some substantial severe weather, potentially in parts of the Great Plains. This would more than likely, if it were to impact the United States, it'd be more of a northern plains severe weather event. As we go into Thursday into Friday, another trough tries to develop as well down in the Southwest United States as really in the high plains, and this is another negatively tilted trough. It's a very small scale one, but this could also bring the potential for a severe weather outbreak. Now, where would that happen if this was to happen? Well, overall, it would probably happen somewhere in here. So somewhere in the central or southern plains, that's where that greatest risk would be. And by the way, we are going into mid to late June now, and we are still seeing significant severe weather in the southern plains, including Texas, which isn't overly common for this time of the year. Usually we're starting to see that transition to severe weather in areas like the central and northern plains. This is usually the hot spot during late June for severe weather, and overall we're still seeing significant severe weather in Texas, which again, not very common for this time of the year. As we go into next weekend, things will stay interesting with that negatively tilted trough potentially going to the Midwest. That could bring showers and storms to the East Coast, and then eventually going to next week, things become quite uncertain, but we might start to go back to potentially another omega block pattern. But again, that is very far out, so we'll have to wait and see what happens over the next few days to really determine what it looks like by then. One other thing before we show you the severe weather potential for the next several days is the temperatures. Interesting stuff here. Monday and Tuesday, we actually have below average temperatures across the Midwest and as well as areas in the Mid-Atlantic region, Ohio Valley, and even the Central Plains, believe it or not. And as we go throughout the week, this will be kind of a trend, but we'll eventually start to return to around average, if not above average temperatures. And notice down in Texas, well above average temperatures. Once you see these darker reds, that is indicating well above average temperatures. Many areas could get into the low to mid 100. So we could be talking about temperatures ranging from 100 to 105, heat indices possibly as high as 120, including today, by the way. Corpus Christi expected to be 118 for a heat index today. As we go through Saturday to Sunday, that heat does continue, and as we go into next week, another omega block pattern is not out of the question. You'll notice all that heat from the Great Plains all the way through Canada. That is something we really do not need, especially as we get closer to summer, but obviously this is what summer brings, but this is well above average for this time of the year. We are usually not in the 100s this early in parts of Texas. Now let's talk more about the severe weather potential for today. Today will easily be the most interesting day of them all. We do have a lot of areas in the risk for severe weather. You'll notice there's one area back over on the East Coast that's a bit more of a low-grade threat, but there is a slight risk for severe weather, damaging winds, large hail, maybe a couple tornadoes possible along the East Coast. Notice back down in the southern plains and back through the Dixie Alley, there is actually a slight risk of severe weather for a pretty elongated area. In addition to this, there is an enhanced risk, very small, but it is very noticeable for those in parts of central and as well as northern Texas. This is mainly for the threat of damaging winds and large hail. There also could be an isolated tornado. That tornado risk is the highest across areas near DFW back through Waco and as well as Abilene. Now, in terms of the hail risk, we really have a lot of concerns here for today. We could be talking about giant hail that is upwards of 4 to maybe even 4.5 inches in diameter out of a storm or two later this afternoon. That is if everything goes according to plan in terms of these severe storms. We could very well see some very nasty supercells across central and northern Texas, and this is primarily going to be including those in between Abilene and Waco. That is the main area just southwest of DFW, but there very well could be a pretty significant hailstorm near DFW. There is a hatched area there that's representing your chance for hail over the size of 2 inches in diameter. Tornado risk, as I mentioned before, is not very high today. It is low, but the greatest risk for that right now is going to be in between Abilene and Waco. That is where a train of discrete supercells is very possible later today. And the flying trampoline outlook for today, not too concerning. Damaging winds will be a threat for those in southwestern North Texas. Greatest threat is again in between Abilene and Waco. Very common trend for today. This is an area that we could see damaging winds up to 80 miles per hour later this afternoon. Now let's talk about the timing for today. Beginning with 3 to 4 o'clock, not a whole lot of activity by this time. However, we will begin to see convection boiling across central Texas. So near Abilene, you'll notice that one first discrete supercell that will likely develop sometime around 4 o'clock-ish today, so between 3 to 5. Eventually, as we go closer to 5 to 6 o'clock, more discrete cells are starting to pop up. That is when we could very well be talking about very significant hail, damaging winds, and as well as a tornado risk, especially out of the first initial cell that develops. This one will likely track down to the southeast. That could very well produce some very significant hail, but again, location can vary sometimes, especially on future radars. As we get closer to 7, multiple discrete cells ongoing. The most significant of them all will again be south of Interstate 20 and west of Interstate 35W. By 8 to 9 o'clock, storms continue to march out to the east, and by 10 to 11 o'clock, still some significant hail potential across central and as well as north Texas. And eventually get closer to 11 to 12 o'clock, there might still be some storms near DFW, but most of these will not be producing significant hail. There might still be some large hail, but I wouldn't be really expecting anything too high beyond 2 inches in diameter. But then some strong storms will still continue overnight, but overall the severe weather threat will be lower by then. Make sure you take the proper precautions today because it will be a very active afternoon and evening. Now, tomorrow's severe weather threat is not really going to be significant, but it will be covering a large area for damaging winds, hail, and maybe a couple tornadoes. This is going to range from the DFW Metroplex in North Texas all the way back through northern Florida. Again, the main concern tomorrow is large hail and damaging winds, but there might be an isolated tornado as well. For the timing for tomorrow, there will be a lot of storm activity in the morning. A lot of this will just be an MCS setup, so we'll be watching for some damaging wind potential out of a weakening cluster of storms. As we go closer to lunchtime, it's going to become a bit drier, and eventually as we go into the afternoon, more storms will pop up. The ones that do end up forming down in East Texas and back through Louisiana will have a good threat for at least some damaging winds and hail. Tornado risk does remain very low tomorrow, and as we go through the evening and overnight hours, more storms will develop, especially down in the southeast United States. And you'll notice that on the future radar here as we go through the morning. Weakening complex of storms across the southeast United States. It might actually strengthen a bit as we go closer to the late afternoon in southeast, like Georgia, for example. As we go into the evening hours and overnight hours, more storms will develop overnight. A lot of these will just be producing some isolated damaging winds and hail, so make sure you're prepared for that overnight. And as we go into Wednesday morning, more storm activity will continue there. We might still see some severe weather lingering as we go into Wednesday. Before this forecast ends, look at the high temperatures on Sunday. This is currently forecasted. It's obviously a week from today, so things will change, but very hot across the United States. Some areas in the 90s, almost all of Texas in the low 100s. No thank you. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.